Rango, a 2011 animated film directed by Gore Verbinski, follows the story of a chameleon, brilliantly voiced by Johnny Depp. The film begins with Rango, a domesticated pet, accidentally getting lost in the Mojave Desert while traveling with his owners. Stranded and searching for water, he stumbles upon the town of Dirt, a lawless outpost inhabited by various desert animals. Rango, eager to establish a new identity and be recognized as a hero, creates a grandiose persona for himself, claiming to be a tough gunslinger. Impressed by his confidence and tall tales, the town folk embrace Rango as their sheriff. However, Rango soon realizes that Dirt is suffering from a severe water shortage.
I've been thinking, and I believe I've figured something out. You folks have a water problem.
As Rango navigates the treacherous landscape of Dirt, he encounters a diverse cast of characters, including Beans, a tough but compassionate desert iguana, and Rattlesnake Jake, a ruthless gunslinger. Rango's journey to uncover the truth behind the water shortage leads him to confront his own identity crisis, as he grapples with the choice between maintaining his folk persona and embracing his true sense of self. Through a series of adventures and challenges, Rango discovers that the mayor has been manipulating the town's inhabitants for personal gain. The mayor controls the town's dwindling water supply and maintains the illusion of order through his deceitful tactics. After Rango was exposed by Rattlesnake Jake for being a fraud, Rango walks into the desert, defeated and hopeless.
All you've done is lie to these good people. You ain't nothing but a fake and a coward. Isn't that right? Louder!
Yes.
When Rango is at his lowest, he comes to meet the spirit of the West. After this interaction, Rango becomes determined to restore justice and bring water back to the town, and stand up against the tyranny of Tortoise Johnny. In the film's climactic showdown, Rango confronts the mayor and exposes his deception. Rango ultimately learns the importance of embracing his true self and standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity.
The movie is no doubt fun to watch, but does the movie offer us more if we were to spend a bit more time analyzing the themes? And for me, the answer is yes. Rango explores a variety of existential themes in a meaningful way. But before just jumping into these themes, I thought it will be useful to just outline briefly what exactly existentialism is.
Existentialism, commonly viewed as the vogue philosophy from Paris that flourished in the aftermath of World War II, talking about the meaning of life in Parisian cafes, or perhaps more accurately, the meaninglessness of life. Many disenfranchised teenagers and young adults revert to the work of Camus or Sartre as an alternative to the views and beliefs they grew up with, finding the beliefs they grew up with as lacking in enough substance, rigor, and honesty to guide them in their lives. It has become part of our common discourse to describe oneself as undergoing an existential crisis. Although this might mean something different for many people, and we don't always fully understand what the other person is going through, we at least comprehend what they are trying to say with these two short words. They are going through a period of doubt, be it about who they are, what they want out of life, or what choices they should make. And although this phrase has become embedded in the language we use daily, existentialism as a philosophical movement or a field of thought can be quite difficult to define, as it covers a broad range of thinkers that differ in not only their views, but also in the way they ultimately convey these views and ideas. Someone like Dostoevsky wrote novels. Nietzsche wrote mainly using aphorisms, metaphors, hyperboles, and ironical remarks. Kierkegaard wrote under the guise of pseudonyms, each with their own personality and background. Others like Sartre and Heidegger, on the other hand, wrote perhaps more systematic philosophical texts and analyses, although Sartre also wrote in prose as well. Many people also mainly associate existentialism with the French intellectual movement of the 20th century. The works of Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus come to mind. The themes explored by these three existential philosophers are, however, not new or unique. Philosopher Thomas Flynn writes in the book Existentialism, a very short introduction, that, despite its claim to be novel and unprecedented, Existentialism represents a long tradition in the history of philosophy in the West, extending back at least to Socrates. He continues to write that this type of philosophy is the practice of philosophy as care of the self. Its focus is on the proper way of acting rather than on abstract set of theoretical truths. Existential philosophy and existential art confront us with the question, how should I act? At its core, existentialism is about discerning the proper way to live one's life. This question of how we should act leads to questions like, who am I? Whom should I be? And how do I become who I should be? All questions we as humans have been asking for centuries. Underlying these questions is the assumption that they can only be answered through some form of care of the self, a type of truth that is different from scientific truth, but rather comes through self-reflection and deep contemplation. Thomas Flynn continues to write, the existentialists can be viewed as reviving this more personal notion of truth, a truth that is lived as distinct from and often in opposition to more detached and scientific use of the term. So coming to define existentialism and its main tenets is no easy task. I particularly like philosopher Arthur Holmes' description of existentialism in his lecture series on the history of philosophy.
Existentialism is not primarily, however, a theoretical position, a theory, a set of doctrines. It's not primarily a school of thought. It's more a focus of attention, of concern. A focus, that is to say, on human existence. Not on the essence of human nature. No, that would be essentialism, not existentialism. It's not a focus on essence, but on existence. On the problem of human existence as we experience it.
Existentialism for me is a philosophy of ambiguity. It is a philosophy that goes out into the messy and murky parts of human existence, and instead of trying to ignore it or escape from it, it faces it head on, with all the accompanying dread, despair, and anxiety that comes with grappling with such difficult questions. It is a philosophy that explores the paradoxical nature of human existence. We are finite beings, always seeking the infinite. We have a deep desire to become who we are, to find our purpose, but are conditioned to conform to the customs of our time. We seek to find meaning and purpose, but at times we feel the immense weight of the indifference of the universe to our existence. We seek God, the ultimate portrayal of truth, but can only assert this objective truth through the subjective act of faith. These paradoxical aspects of our human existence, I believe, are explored in the movie Rango to varying degrees of success. By focusing on 4 key themes of existentialism, I aim to show the extent to which Rango successfully portrays some of these features of the human condition. These themes are the quest for authenticity, existence precedes essence, confronting mortality, time is of the essence, the human condition, freedom and responsibility, and religion, what to make of the spirit of the West. By exploring the extent to which Rango succeeds in exploring each of these themes, we will be able to determine whether Rango can be regarded as a true masterpiece, or whether it is, in fact, a fun movie, but without much substance, making it pseudo-philosophical rather than truly meaningful. The movie Rango starts off with Rango in his little glass terrarium, isolated from the cruelties of the real world. He is safe, most likely fed often by his human owners, and in a way has nothing to worry about. At least, nothing about finding food and shelter. He is busy directing a play with his so-called friends or companions, all of whom are either inanimate objects or dead. There is Victor the plastic tree, Mr. Timms the toy fish, an unnamed plastic doll, and Dr. Marks, the dead cockroach. Rango is for us as the audience, as well as for himself, completely undefined. The way he acts out his own play seems to be a projection of his own internal dialogue and how he views himself in his own story, as undefined. Despite having his physical needs met, that is, he has shelter, is safe, and has water, Rango is truly unhappy, as he realizes that his character in his own play, and most likely he himself, albeit at an unconscious level, needs some form of conflict to arise to push the hero forward in becoming who he or she is. The car his terrarium is in swerves. The terrarium flies out of the window and is thrown into the real world. In a way, he is thrown into existence. 17th century thinker Blaise Pascal described this situation of Rango and one we all face as follows. I am frightened and amazed at finding myself here rather than there, for there is no reason whether why here rather than there, why now rather than then. Rango finds himself in a desert, faced with people, or rather animals he does not know, confronted with problems he did not cause, and with dangers he does not comprehend or necessarily know how to overcome. All he can do is choose how to respond to all of this. Whom will he choose to be in this messy existence he finds himself in? It is clear that Rango's existence precedes his essence. The maxim existence precedes essence, coined by philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, is described by Thomas Flynn as follows. What you are, your essence, is the result of your choices, your existence, rather than the reverse. Essence is not destiny. You are what you make yourself to be.
We as the audience are given no real insight into where Rango comes from or where he was going. As the movie progresses, we are given no real insight into his life in the terrarium or his past.
Rather, his life, his story, starts the moment he finds himself in the desert. Thus his existence, that is, him being alive and in this world, that is the setting in which the movie plays out, comes before his essence, before he knows who he is or what his purpose is. It is now up to him to choose who he will become. This fact of existence preceding essence is elevated by the fact that Rango is a chameleon. He can change color. He can change in a way who he is, based on his circumstances and surroundings. Rango must embark on a journey of self-discovery and a search for meaning in the chaotic town of dirt. Rango's identity crisis mirrors the existential struggle of individuals seeking to uncover their true selves within a world that demands conformity.
Existentialism posits that choice is an essential aspect of human existence, as it is through our choices that we define ourselves and create meaning in our lives. Soren Kierkegaard emphasized the importance of individual choice in confronting the inherent anxiety and uncertainty of existence. According to Kierkegaard, human beings are faced with the existential dilemma of choosing between living an authentic life or succumbing to conformity and inauthenticity.
It is quite interesting that this tension between choosing to become your authentic self and conforming to societal norms are the two different views Rango is advised to take by the first two characters he meets. We have the armadillo Roadkill, who talks about enlightenment and the spirit of the West. He talks about how each of us undertake our own journey to discover what we need to discover. Roadkill clearly represents our quest for authenticity. The second character, the frog or the toad that Rango meets in the desert, advises Rango to blend in. And although this is in light of an eagle swerving above them, and as such perhaps necessary for Rango's survival at the moment, this is the advice Rango remembers when he first arrives in the town of Dirt. We see this played out by him copying the actions of the animals in the street. The fact that Rango was introduced to the idea of blending in a moment where it was necessary for his survival, is quite interesting. The film points out, be it intentional or coincidental, why there would exist such a tension between conformity and authenticity. The tension exists because conformity can be valuable. In many ways, for you to survive as an individual and become part of the society you live in, you have to conform. And the more you conform, the more that specific society would award you. If you were to play into that society's idea of success, for example, and work towards achieving that goal, while remaining part of a respectable society, you would be praised. And for this very reason, it is difficult to choose the path of authenticity, because many times it goes against the grain. It is this very tension that propels the story of Rango forward, and which I argue is explored in a meaningful enough way for it to be stated that the film, at the very least, has an overarching existential motif. At the beginning of the movie, we are already confronted with the fact that Rango will die. The Owl Mariachi Band opens the movie with the following lines.
We are gathered here today to immortalize in song the life and untimely death of a great legend.
A few times in the movie, one of the owls asks the same question of when Rango will die again, and when the movie ends, Rango does not die. He saves the day and seemingly has ensured a better future for the people of the town of Dirt. And yet again, the owl asks, when will he die?
Although he is certain to die, perhaps from a household accident, which accounts for 65% of all unnatural deaths.
This constant reference to death brings to our attention one of the harsh realities of our own existence, a reality we must all face one day, our own death. And as such, the reference to his death throughout the movie makes us aware that beyond this story, Rango's life will come to an end. This reality of death is also played out in the movie, where the director was not afraid to show the death of characters, some of them being random. The death of the eagle, for example, is truly unfortunate. From Rango's perspective, Lady Luck was on his side, but from the eagle's perspective, it was unfortunate. We also see the death of the banker, who was drowned to death, and although we do not see him being killed, we do see him as dead on screen, which is much more than most animations would show. Reference is made to the previous sheriff's death, and they show his tombstone as well. Despite death being a constant reality for these people, where any one of them can die at any given moment, they still wake up every day, they still show up to work, and they still have hope for a better future. For me, Rango does explore this time-bound nature of our existence. It does not spend a lot of time on it.
And it does explore some other existential themes with more depth, but at least it doesn't just brush over it completely.
We are constantly reminded throughout the movie of Rango's finitude, and as such come to see him as fragile and vulnerable. This acknowledgement of the finitude of Rango's existence, and the finitude of each character's existence, gives more reason for it to be regarded as an existential work of art.
This tension between the finite and the infinite, or this tension between being confronted with the fact that one might be living in a meaningless and indifferent world, are all tensions that are explored in existential works. And in Rango, I do not feel that same tension with a lot of these paradoxical aspects of our existence. To defend Rango in this area where it falls a bit short, I think we must acknowledge the type of movie that it is. It is an animated film produced by Nickelodeon, and as such, the target audience is not only a broader audience, but more specifically a younger audience, and the movie must thus be appealing and also palatable to a younger audience. I will discuss this point further at the end of my video, where I will give my final judgment.
Existentialism aims to find the human amidst all of these scientific and philosophical systems that praise rationality. It aims to find the human again within our modern industrialized society. Where is the human in the factory? Where is the human who pushes coal, laboring for hours on end merely to keep the steam train running? Where is the human who turns to religious institutions that are more committed to progress and rationality than to compassion, forgiveness, and love? Where is the human who died in the trenches of World War I? Where is the human who has lost their loved one in this war to end all wars? Where is the human in the Jewish concentration camps? Where is the human in the Nazi officer? Where is the human in squatter camps, sweatshops, and child labor? And even more cynical, where is the human in the institution of marriage? Where is the human in our modern day jobs, pushing numbers and chasing money and riches as the ultimate purpose of their lives? Invest in crypto, try this hack, read this productivity book, don't say that. Wear these brands, eat junk food, don't eat junk food, recycle, pay your taxes. Where is the human in respectable society, where it is more frowned upon to become yourself than to lose yourself but gain the world? To quote Soren Kierkegaard from his work The Sickness Unto Death, the greatest hazard of all, losing the self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. No other loss can occur so quietly. Any other loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is sure to be noticed. Thomas Flynn writes, Existentialism is a person-centered philosophy. Though not anti-science, it focuses on the human individual's pursuit of identity and meaning amidst the social and economic pressures of mass society for superficiality and conformism.
Existentialism aims to reflect on the context you find yourself in, and instead of conforming to that context, you actively strive to become yourself. That is, you try to live authentically instead of inauthentically.
Thomas Flynn writes, Existentialism is a philosophy of freedom. Its basis is the fact that we can stand back from our lives and reflect on what we've been doing. In this sense, we are almost more than ourselves, but we are as responsible as we are free. These three key concepts, freedom, authenticity, and responsibility, are essential features of the human condition for the existentialists. Each one of these concepts form a key part of Rango's journey towards self-discovery. Although Rango tries to blend in, he also sticks out like a sore thumb. He starts to speak like people of the town of dirt and even dresses like them, foregoing his red floral shirt for his new sheriff's uniform. At the same time, he constantly acts in a way that is different and odd as well. His accent might be that of his own townspeople, but the words he uses are different.
Clearly, the robbers came from this direction. I say we track this pipe back to its hydraulic origin and apprehend the culprits behind this aquatic conundrum.
What'd he say?
I think he said follow the pipe.
He said follow the pipe.
He said follow the pipe.
Also has an interesting and unique way to solve the problems he is confronted with. His idea to distract the old man and his sons through a play to take back the water they have stolen is uniquely Rango, and contrary to any of the ways these individuals would have approached the situation. For the existentialists, we are free and responsible for who we are and what we do. This does not mean we are wholly undetermined, but rather that we are always beyond or more than ourselves because of our capacity to interpret and give meaning to whatever limits or determines us.
There are thus limits to Rango's freedom, which I think is fully acknowledged in the movie.
He finds himself in a particular time in history, within a particular setting, within a particular culture, and is faced with very particular problems. This is what Sartre would refer to as his facticity, and this facticity is what limits him. Within this specific set of circumstances, he is also confronted with the question of who he is, and he has to find out who he is amidst his given circumstances, with all of the temptations to conform and adapt. There is thus a tension between conformity and authenticity. Broadly, for the existentialists, an authentic life is one that is willing to break with tradition and social convention and courageously affirm the freedom and contingency of our condition. It is generally understood to refer to a life lived with a sense of urgency and commitment, based on the meaning-giving projects that matter to each of us as individuals. Rango clearly challenges the social conventions. He aims to bring a sense of order to a lawless town. He stands up against the authority figures. He does not merely rely on faith, but rather on his own actions to solve the water problem, which seems to be contrary to what the other people in the town has done so far, all except perhaps for beings. Although he does conform to his circumstances in some ways, the ultimate purpose that he chose for himself is to bring about social change for his community. And when he realizes that it is those in power who are at the root of the water shortage problem, that is Tortoise John, he aims not only to confront him, but aims to overthrow him. He is fully committed to his own meaning-giving project. Rango did perhaps create a persona for himself based on tall tales and lies, but ultimately uses that persona to bring about change. And in this process of taking action, building relationships, and fighting for what he believes to be right, he finds a sense of identity. Through taking responsibility and acting in accordance with this insight that he is free to choose within the limits of his current circumstances, he is able to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. He can fully integrate the parts of his persona that are true with his more normal sense of self.
We in our own lives do something very similar. We rely on past experiences and memories that we sometimes can't fully remember, just like Rango, and we use those stories, failures, successes, etc. to build a sense of self, a persona, within our given context and environment, and we call that self our identity. And if we feel some form of disconnect between our environment and whom we've come to view ourselves to be, we undergo an identity crisis. The answer to this identity crisis, for the existentialist at least, is to go out and create who you are meant to be through your choices. This moment of crisis, which is filled with anxiety and despair, is seen as an opportunity for transformation and growth. One does not, however, for the existentialist, reach a point where you live in full authenticity, where you have fully transcended the norms of your culture, and where you fully become who you are meant to be.
For the existentialists, our entire life is an ongoing choice. Becoming an individual is a task to be undertaken and sustained, but perhaps never permanently achieved. Existing as an individual is always dynamic and underway, never static and complete.
This continuous development of becoming a self, as Kierkegaard would say, is nicely portrayed at the end of the movie. When Rango saves the day, he has the following interaction with the little girl.
Rango! Oh. You brought the water back, just like you promised. You really are a hero.
Oh, well, the thing about heroes is whenever you...
Don't spoil it.
Right.
This is my favorite moment in the movie. The girl sees right through Rango's persona, and although she acknowledges him as a hero, she also makes him aware that she sees through his act. Again, the tension between conformity and authenticity is highlighted, and highlighting it at the very end places emphasis on the fact that we can never rid ourselves of this tension.
The capacity for freedom of choice is, however, not unrestricted, where you can do whatever you want. With the sense of freedom comes an equal level of responsibility.
Although generally speaking, existentialists reject the idea of moral absolutes and universalizing judgments about right conduct, existentialism should not be dismissed for promoting moral nihilism. For existentialists, a moral or praiseworthy life is possible. It is one where we acknowledge and own up to our freedom, take full responsibility for our choices, and act in such a way as to help others realize their freedom. For Jean-Paul Sartre, the choice for authenticity is a moral decision. This is exactly the advice the Spirit of the West gives Rango close to the end of the movie. Rango becomes aware that he is free to choose who he wants to be, but that this freedom of choice becomes meaningless if it is not used to help others to become more free themselves. Rango only acts out his freedom by taking responsibility for those he has come to care for. The movie clearly acknowledges this interconnectedness of freedom, authenticity, and responsibility, and I would say does so in quite an impactful way.
The emphasis on relationships and being for others allows me to segue into the next part of the movie I want to discuss. When watching Rango, I was confronted with the question of whether the movie is irreligious. Religion, or put differently, belief in God, is one of the main preoccupations of existential thought. Even the harshest critics of belief in God and Christianity within the existential movement spend a tremendous amount of time engaging with our proclivity to believe in God. As such, I want to discuss the extent to which the movie explores religion and faith. For an animated movie that is meant for a wider audience, including young children, and produced by a company like Nickelodeon, I think the movie does a really good job of portraying the role religious belief plays and has played in the lives of humans. When I did some research while writing the transcript for this video, I came across a blog post entitled "Controversial Message Makes Movie Hard to Love." In this blog post, the individual writes, "The
plot twists a few times, but when I watched it, I was more focused on the message the movie overtly conveyed. You must make your own meaning in life. Religion is no more than the opiate of the masses, and God is as confused about everything as you are. The individual continues to write. Rango becomes desperate and seeks out the spirit of the West, i.e. God, but the spirit is occupied with some seeking of his own and tells Rango that the lizard must fulfill his own story, apparently without the spirit's help or intervention, and concludes close to the end of the blog post. Rango affronts all that Christians hold sacred, namely God. I tend to disagree quite a lot with this blog post. I remember when I was younger and watched this movie for the first time, I was not sure what exactly the stance the movie took on religion, and even thought that it would make more sense for the movie to be atheistic, given that it does critique blind faith and how people rely on religion to in a way solve their personal and societal problems. But rewatching it, and after engaging with some of the work of various existential thinkers, I don't think the movie takes an exact stance on religious belief and as such God. Now, most if not all existentialists would agree that we must make our own meaning in life, as has been discussed earlier in the video and mentioned in the blog post.
But many existentialists were theists, that is, they did believe in God. And just because the main message of the movie is that you have to go out and create your own meaning, does not automatically imply that there is no God, that God is indifferent, or that he is just as confused about everything as you are. And I'm by no means making the case that Rango does assert that God exists or that we need a God. I am, however, trying to make the point that the movie is a bit more unclear as to the role religious belief should play in our lives.
It acknowledges, I think, the tension that exists between objective truth and subjective faith. For me, the movie makes us reflect on religion and the role it plays or does not play in our lives. Rather than taking a stance, the movie highlights one of the most inescapable tensions within religious belief. On the one hand, it can at times seem fanatical and blind us. It can be used as an ideological mechanism to distract people from the real problems and will even seem absurd from an outsider's perspective. The movie portrays this reality of religious belief in how Tortoise John uses religion to misguide and manipulate the people of dirt. On the other hand, however, it is something that gives people hope. It brings people together to hope for and fight for a better future. It is what can motivate people to act despite their circumstances, their losses and traumas, and their own suffering. This perspective is clearly shown in this scene, where this group of animals, while on their quest for the stolen water, join hands to pray to the spirit of the West.
Tonight, I want to thank you for bringing Sheriff Rango into our lives. It's a hard life we got. Sometimes I don't know how we're gonna make it. Somehow, Sheriff Rango makes me think we will.
Rango is touched by their faith, and it clearly has an impact on him. This scene has no satirical component to it, or is meant to point out the naivety of faith. In many ways, it actually makes a very strong case for the value of faith and belief. Rango's interaction with the spirit of the West is fundamentally a spiritual one, and not an isolated individualistic enlightenment. It is a relational one, I would argue. The line in this scene that makes it more clear for me that the movie does not take on an exact stance towards religion is when Roadkill, the armadillo from the beginning of the movie, states, "We all see what we need to see."
Did you just see that? We each see what we need to see. Beautiful, isn't it?
He does not state that we see what we want to see, but what we need to see, which is not the same thing. Some might argue that this puts forward a relativistic understanding of truth, and that for each of us God or the ultimate truth or value would be different and as such does not exist, which I would need to disagree with again. Soren Kierkegaard had this extremely insightful way of looking at belief, specifically belief in the Christian God. He talked about belief in God as a subjective truth. Now, the meaning of subjective here does not mean the way we would use it in everyday language, where we use it to say, from your perspective. Kierkegaard does not use subjective to mean relativistic, or put differently, subjective truth is not merely a psychological truth.
Kierkegaard believed that traditional views of truth, which emphasized objective verification and universal agreement, were inadequate to fully capture the richness and complexity of human experience.
Kierkegaard wrote in his work Concluding Unscientific Postscript, "The way of objective reflection makes the subject accidental and thereby transforms existence into something indifferent, something vanishing. It leads to abstract thought, to mathematics, to historical knowledge of different kinds, and always it leads away from the subject whose existence or non-existence, and from the objective point of view quite rightly, becomes infinitely indifferent. Quite rightly, since, as Hamlet says, existence has only one subjective significance." In the book From Hegel to Existentialism, philosopher Robert Solomon writes on Kierkegaard's notion of subjectivity as truth. In the work of Kierkegaard, truth is used in a more extended sense. Truth is the goal of a human endeavor. Scientific truth is one kind of truth, but morality, religion, art, and music have their truths as well. This is not merely to say that there are truths about morality, religion, art, and music. In morality, truth is right action and wisdom. In religion, the truth is a relationship with God. In art and music, truth is beauty. In Kierkegaard's philosophy, truth is used in this extended sense. The truths of morality, religion, art, and music are very different from the truths of science and mathematics, and not only in the sense that the enterprises and consequently the goals are different. Now, Kierkegaard does not reject objective truth or science, mathematics, and abstract theory in any proper domain or medium. He rejects only the idea that they provide the only kind of truth.
Instead, Kierkegaard argued that subjective experience is the only way to truly understand the world, and that each person's unique perspective is the foundation of their truth. This means that truth is not something that can be objectively verified or proven, but rather something that is felt and experienced by the individual. I am reminded of the words of Roadkill again. Each of us sees what we need to see. Kierkegaard's notion of subjectivity as truth is closely tied to his concept of faith. In his view, faith is not a matter of objective knowledge or rational argument, but rather a subjective experience of one's relationship with God. This means that faith cannot be proven or disproven, but is rather a matter of personal experience and interpretation. Kierkegaard's emphasis on subjective experience as the foundation of truth has important implications for ethics and morality. In his view, ethical decisions cannot be made solely on the basis of objective rules or principles, but must be grounded in personal experience and understanding. This means that ethical decisions are not simply a matter of following a set of rules or conforming to social norms, but rather a matter of personal responsibility and choice.
Which I think is quite close to the message the movie Rango is trying to put forward.
By emphasizing the importance of subjective experience and interpretation, Kierkegaard challenges traditional views of truth and opens up new avenues for exploring the complexities of human experience.
Arthur Holmes' lectures on the history of philosophy might give us even more clarification on this notion of subjectivity as truth.
Now, notice these terms. There are places where he talks of truth as subjective. Now be careful of that. He does not mean that it's just in your mind and nowhere else. That pop use of subjective. He does not mean it's relative. Because he uses the terms objective and subjective as ways of describing one's relationship to God or to the truth. You see? Or more specifically, he uses objective for describing your rational relationship to the truth. Detached, measuring how far you have yet to go, and so forth. And he uses subjective for talking about our relationship not to the truth, but to God himself. Focus here on the personal relationship, whereas here it's on the logic of natural theology. You see the difference?
If we use the same criteria for truth that we use for science, that requires clarity and precision, and we apply that type of truth and attitude to religious belief, I think we cultivate an attitude and view very similar to the individual that wrote the blog post. That is, that anything that is ambiguous or requires further clarification, rather than the meaning being apparent or clear from the start, has to be against reason, has to be irreligious, and as such has to be against God. For Kierkegaard, belief in God is not rational. It is not something that is straightforward, but it is rather complicated and in a way paradoxical. And this far better encapsulates my own relationship with belief and faith than relating or comparing faith to the rational.
And this, I argue, is the stance Rango takes on belief. For the individual who wrote the blog post, they regard the appearance of the Spirit of the West and his lack of directly helping Rango as an example of a lack of divine intervention. Yet the appearance of the Spirit of the West is the exact thing that revolves Rango's internal conflict and essentially inspires him to save the people from the tyranny of Tortoise John. The interaction with the Spirit of the West not only inspires Rango to help the people of the town of Third, but it plays a big part in helping him resolve his own internal conflict and his search for who he is. That is more of a divine intervention than some of the most avid believer would receive in their entire lives. As such, the movie, I feel, acknowledges the complexity of belief and faith, and at times has more atheistic and individualistic leanings, and at other times has more religious undertones, where it showcases the importance and value of belief, faith, and relationship.
This ambiguity is also a far better representation of the human condition, and as such stays true to the attitude of various existential thinkers. I also don't think that the movie addresses Christian faith specifically, but rather talks about belief and faith in a more general sense. This does not only allow the movie to speak to a wider audience, but also allows us to reflect on various kinds of beliefs and our relationship towards those beliefs as well.
Furthermore, the Spirit of the West does not give Rango any guarantees. He does not tell him what to do or that it will be alright. He rather tells Rango that it is not about him, that it is about the other people, and Rango should go out and live for them. But Rango does not know that it will work out. He does not know that he will succeed, and is faced with the exact same challenges that he had to face before he talked to the Spirit of the West. As such, Rango's choice at the end of the movie is an act of faith, rather than acting upon some guarantee that things will work out, which is ultimately what true belief entails. One acts not out of certainty that things will work out, but rather hoping things will work out despite the uncertainty. As such, he takes a leap of faith in the Kierkegaardian sense. Rango acts in accordance with the belief that those he cares for are important, that his relationship with them is meaningful, that who he is found in serving them and being in relation to them, and given this insight, he is willing to go out and die for them.
So what then is my final judgment? Is Rango pseudo-philosophical, or is it truly a masterpiece? Well, I would say neither. I think the movie explores many existential themes in a meaningful way. It highlights the strangeness of the human condition and the world we find ourselves in. It explores and acknowledges the tensions that exist when facing problems of identity, morality, and belief. It also explores themes like responsibility, freedom, and especially bringing about social change. Where the movie falls short, however, is that it only acknowledges these tensions. It doesn't explore them any further. It relies on humor to break these tensions a lot of the time, and also the fact that the characters in the movie are animals. It distances us as the audience from some of the themes explored and also the experiences of these characters. The weight of these existential themes are thus not as heavily felt as other films that we would classify as being existential. Nonetheless, it is a movie that makes not only a younger audience but also an older audience reflect on their own beliefs and lives. It might not be a masterpiece, but for me at least, it is a very good animated movie that explores a variety of existential themes in a meaningful and impactful way.